Would you all please join me in welcoming
thank you.
Stewart to the stage.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Can everyone hear me okay if I speak this loud? Perfect. Okay, my talk tonight is on Charles Darwin, arguably the most beautiful mind in science. I've kind of prepared this talk in three parts. A quick overview of Darwin and the unlikely origins of his participation on HMS Beagle and the voyage of the Beagle. I'm doing a project following Darwin's journey. We've chartered a beautiful historic ship sailing around the world. It's in the last few months of that voyage. So I've got a little overview of what we're up to, in case it was of interest, and then an overview of actually what we've seen and done so far. So starting with Darwin, you might picture an old guy with a white beard, a crusty old man in his late in life with a white beard as Darwin. That's the image most people have. When you say scientist to people, they'll think of Einstein, Newton, or Darwin generally. But Darwin, when he undertook this journey around the world, he was 22, so he was pretty young. It was a 5-year journey from 1831 to 1836. And arguably, this is the greatest story in science, the greatest adventure certainly in natural history. As you may be aware, he sailed aboard a Royal Navy ship called HMS Beagle around the world. This is an engraving of Beagle. But the really, really important point to take away, if you take one thing away tonight, is that it wasn't about Darwin. Darwin wasn't some kind of Columbus figure on the prow of the ship conquering the world. That is the exact opposite of what it was. Darwin came at the last minute. He was incidental to the voyage. The voyage was a Royal Navy survey mission to create maps around the coast of South America. It had nothing to do with Darwin's studies. Darwin came at the very last minute on this epic journey of discovery, which changed the course of the world. But it wasn't about Darwin in the first place. But as you'll hear, hopefully, tonight, this amazing story and the discoveries that he made through this journey have ramifications right the way through to this day. So who was Darwin? As I say, most people think of Darwin as this guy here, this very famous photo, I believe, taken in 1881 of Darwin later in life. But when he undertook the voyage of the Beagle, let's say he was just 22 years old. He's not what you might think. So he grew up in Shrewsbury, in a place called The Mount. He came from a wealthy family. His father was a physician. His mother sadly died very young in his childhood. He didn't do very well at school, like many geniuses in history. Winston Churchill, likewise, was famously bad at school and wasn't regarded well by his teachers. Same with Darwin. He was described as an ordinary boy, rather below the common level of intellect. He spent his adolescence collecting beetles and hunting. And this is he's not a naturalist at this point, not a formed naturalist at this point, but he was obviously obsessed with wildlife. He spent his childhood and his adolescence collecting, particularly beetles. He once told a wonderful story about, later in his life, in his autobiography, about he turned over a log and found a beetle, so picked that one up in his right hand. He found another, even rarer one, picked that one up in his left hand. But then a third, even rarer one still came out. So he put one of the ones in his hands in his mouth, grabbed the third one, and the one in his mouth bit his tongue and released an acrid liquid in his mouth. And so he spat them out and lost them all. But anyway, so it shows you to some extent what he was like a little bit as a boy. He wasn't, though, an accomplished naturalist. He didn't know that much about natural history in many ways as a young man. He spent most of his life shooting, particularly pheasants and rats. His dad joked that he'd become a rat catcher for his career. And later in life, his dad got really serious. Robert Darwin got really serious and later wrote him a letter, which survives to this day. He wrote how you'll bring shame upon yourself, on your family. You care for nothing but hunting and catching rats. So he was basically, in the eyes of his father, a disappointment. He went to Edinburgh to start with, to study medicine, but he hated the sight of blood. And he writes later how he had to observe an operation on a girl who had, I believe, a tumour, if I remember correctly. And this was before chloroform. And he later wrote in his autobiography how the screams of that little girl haunted him for the rest of his life. So he quit medicine. He dropped out of university. He quit his degree. He later went to Cambridge. His father just didn't know what to do with him, basically. And often, with the aristocracy, if they had a son that they didn't know what to do with, they'd often make them become a parson, a country parson. So he went to Cambridge to study theology. At the time when he was at Cambridge, he later wrote in life how he used to hang out with rather low-minded men that would drink too much. So he basically went to university and drank heaps and never got a lot of work done. But while he was at Cambridge, he met Professor Henslow, this amazing professor who really instilled in him a serious passion for studying natural history. And this changed his life. Through Henslow, he became known as the man who walks with Henslow. Every day they'd walk out and collect specimens of beetles and other animals as they went walking. And through Henslow, he got to know of an opportunity to sail upon this Royal Navy ship, the Beagle. Henslow himself had considered the role, but Henslow was about, I think, 15 years older than Darwin and had a family and a wife and couldn't go because they thought it was going to be 3 years at this time. So Henslow offered the place to Darwin. And so Darwin applied, or wanted to apply, but his father initially said, no way. It's just a childhood adventure, a boyhood adventure, be a waste of time. You know, you'll get back and still have no career, no clear path to earn a living. So his dad originally rejected the idea of him going on. His uncle, Josiah Wedgwood, who was the owner of the famous Wedgwood potteries, I'm sure you've seen the blue pottery with white on, Wedgwood. His uncle, Josiah, managed to persuade his father that it would be a good idea for young Charles to take part in this voyage. Charles later wrote how it was a once-in-a-century opportunity, and it really was in many ways. Because today we can fly to Brazil, you know, in 9 hours, we can land in Sao Paulo. Back then, there were a few ships every decade sailing like this, certainly Royal Navy ships like this, and the opportunity for a young naturalist was very far and very few in between. So through this chain of circumstances, Darwin got this opportunity to go. He went to meet Captain Fitzroy. This was the second voyage of the Beagle. There were 4. The first voyage of the Beagle had gone down to Tierra del Fuego, but Captain Stokes, the first commander of the Beagle, shot himself in Tierra del Fuego. He committed suicide at Famine Bay. The rigors of a commander of a 19th century ship were really, really hard. And especially Tierra del Fuego in winter, it's miserable, it's dark, it's wild, it's cold. And poor Captain Stokes shot himself. Fitzroy was dispatched to Tierra del Fuego to take command of the Beagle and bring it back home. So that's precisely what he did in 1830. Brought it back. Then that was his first command. And then the Admiralty gave him this second mission to sail around the world and make these maps of South America. Remember, Captain Fitzroy at this point was 25 years old. It's amazing how young these guys were. Can you imagine giving a ship like the Beagle with 75 men on board? It's about, what would it be, about 35 meters long. Can you imagine giving command to that to a 25-year-old and ordering them to sail around the world and come back again? It's incredible how young these guys were. Anyway, Darwin went to meet Fitzroy, and they had a bit of a rough first encounter. Fitzroy wanted a companion to come on the Beagle. He didn't want to be alone. He didn't want to have the same fate as Captain Stokes, the first captain that shot himself. So he wanted a gentleman companion. Because remember, in the naval hierarchy, you can't be friends with any of the mates, the men, or the officers. You're in command. If you're captain, you cannot have a friend in the crew, really, because you're in command of them. So Fitzroy wanted a companion that was not in the naval structure, that was a gentleman similar to his status, to just mess with, to have dinner with, and honestly, just to talk to. So he interviewed Darwin and nearly rejected him because of the shape of his nose. Victorians believed in phenology, the belief that your traits portray certain characteristics. So, for example, if you have a really big brow, they might say you're intelligent, or, and so forth. Anyway, Fitzroy believed that Darwin's nose indicated that he lacked a sense of determination and attention to detail, which is a slight, understatement eventually. Luckily, he didn't reject him in the end and accepted him, but Darwin still was a civilian on the ship. The point I'm really trying to make is, again, this is not about Darwin. Darwin came at the last minute. He had to pay his way. He had to pay to be on the ship. His dad paid £500 as the preliminary expenses to be on the Beagle. So he was a civilian on a Royal Navy ship sailing around the world. Fitzroy and Darwin eventually went down. The ship was refitted at Devonport along the coast, and eventually went to Plymouth in 1831, where it eventually set sail. It was actually meant to leave on Boxing Day in 1831. It had weeks of delays, and it was meant to leave on Boxing Day, but the crew got so incredibly drunk for Christmas. No, really, they really did. It couldn't leave, so it eventually left on the 27th, and it undertook this epic journey of discovery, which Darwin was party to. I can gladly come back and give a talk specifically on this journey if you want me to. I've developed tonight an overview of what we're doing with Darwin 200 and this voyage that we're recreating. It would be an entire different talk to look at all of the things that they saw and discovered along the way. But in essence, there was no single eureka moment. This wasn't a lightning strike, despite what you might have read or seen in popular culture. It wasn't that Darwin got to the Galapagos Islands or, giant tortoises and finches, evolution. That is not how it happened at all. He made meticulous observations. He himself evolves during the voyage. At the start, he actually has very rudimentary knowledge. For example, in Cape Verde, he sights an octopus. He sees an octopus in the rock pools and writes back super excitedly to Professor Henslow, saying how octopuses can change colour. And of course, this was something that had been known for hundreds of years. So Henslow wrote back saying, yeah, of course they do, everyone knows that. But he evolves as he changes through this journey. He becomes arguably the greatest observer. His power of observation literally changes through the journey, as does his interests. He's initially really interested in geology, but as he goes to the Brazilian rainforests, down the coast of Patagonia, to the Falkland Islands, then up through the Chilean fjords, then across the Pacific, he becomes this incredibly astute mind that observes a rainbow of subjects, not just natural selection. Anyway, focusing on natural selection, though, obviously his most important book by far was On the Origin of the Species, which explains the origin of life on Earth. And that changed absolutely everything and has ramifications to this day. But the process of writing that spans 15 years. He gets back from the Beagle and accumulates an enormous wealth of observations. The concluding paragraph of this book is arguably, I think, one of the most beautiful paragraphs, and I just wanted to read it very quickly, one of the most beautiful paragraphs in science. So this is after, through meticulous experimentation, he's proven the case that species can change as a result of different environmental conditions through natural selection, through the inherent selective processes that favor certain traits that then encourage reproduction and population increase. And he writes, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having originally been breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed laws of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved." So Darwin put forward this new vision of nature, of natural history. This absolutely abutted against thinking at the time. As you may be aware, the book On the Origin of Species sold out on the day of publication. But Darwin was immediately vilified. He was described as the most dangerous man in England. Ironically, he describes himself quivering like a jelly at home. This came after basically years of procrastination. He deliberately didn't want to publish this book because he was feared about how it would be received. And this was the exact opposite of what he ever intended. He didn't want to cause a fuss. He didn't want to challenge, thinking at the time, really. Anyway, literally hundreds of cartoons, mocking cartoons, were made of him, vilifying him. I just circled this one. This says ignorance on this. I'm not sure, whatever he's jumping through here. Credulity over here and ignorance. This is mocking Darwin. He was described as the monkey man and an evil man. And there were literally hundreds and hundreds of these illustrations. And in this particular drawing, it's saying this gorilla is crying because the caption below reads something like, Darwin's offended me because he said he's my family. So to be clear, evolution is not saying gorillas or chimpanzees are our descendants or our ancestors. Rather, that they're a parallel lineage of hominids, of apes, sorry. Literally hundreds of these cartoons were published vilifying and destroying the image of this great mind. Anyway, arguably at the end of it, of course it was independently seen many, many times by other naturalists around the world and eventually vindicated. But the theory that he promulgated through this journey has been described as the biggest single thought in the history of human thinking. And it really changed everything. It marks the boundary of natural philosophy beforehand and modern scientific thinking and the scientific method afterwards. And it had enormous implications. Of course, with religion as well. And there was a very big, famous debate in Oxford, in the Oxford Natural History Museum, but also the origins of literally everything that you see around us, certainly in the natural world. So it was an incredibly key step in our understanding of science. But Darwin didn't just study natural selection. He studied a rainbow of other subjects, from earthquakes and mountain building. He literally witnessed an earthquake in Concepcion in Chile, and literally saw the rocks in the sea being pushed out of the water and found marine mollusks affixed to them after the earthquake, a meter above the water. So he could literally see the rocks being pushed up from the earthquakes. And then when he climbed the Andes, he found fossilized seashells right at the tops of the mountain. And he realized very quickly that this was a repetitive process that created the mountains, that pushed them up out of the sea. Similarly, the formation of corals and the creation of coral atolls. Obviously, the origin of man. He looked at the carnivorous plants, and he did the very first doctrine on the theory of carnivorous plants. It was a book called Insectivorous Plants. He proved that certain plants could capture and kill insects and other animals and derive benefit from that. And again, with all these different ideas, like with the carnivorous plants, he was ridiculed and mocked and laughed at, but eventually shown to be right. He actually did, I think, 16 books. His very, very last study in his late 70s was a pivotal book. It's a really lovely, humble subject, looking at the formation of soil by earthworms and the impact that has, which is immense. At that time, it wasn't really understood how significant this was, and the impact of earthworms in soil, which I just think is the perfect end to his life. He was such a humble, genuinely humble person, and that was his last study after this immense life of work. Darwin changed the world absolutely with his mind. Today, obviously, our world faces huge problems around the planet, but if you look at all the conservation stories around the world, what comes across from all of them is that there is hope, that it's not too late, and in many cases, it is within our power to change things. I could give you 100 such examples, and I'll give you one in a second. So taking inspiration from Darwin, I created the project Darwin 200, which is my next section of my talk. So what we're doing, we're taking a beautiful ship around the world to change the world of tomorrow. This project is not about problems. It's not another whiny conservation project looking at all the problems of the world, but the exact opposite. It's about solutions. We take a lot of inspiration from Darwin, but also from one of our project patrons, Dr. Jane Goodall, who incidentally also comes from Dorset, down the road in Bournemouth. She's a great friend of mine and a project patron of Darwin 200. Her key message is everyone matters and everyone can make a difference if they want to. So all this originated over a decade ago. I did a BBC TV series looking at the wildlife of all of the UK overseas territories. And I saw the same story again and again and again. And this one, it really exemplifies it. On the Cayman Islands, which is a UK overseas territory in the Caribbean, there's an amazing reptile called the blue iguana. It was practically extinct. There was a few hundred left. I might get the figures slightly wrong. It doesn't really matter anyway. About 2005, there was a few hundred. The next year, there was half that. It was very clear it's going to become extinct. So this amazing man, Fred Burton, over here on the right, captured the last ones, set up a breeding program, and single-handedly saved it from extinction. And today, there's thousands back in the wild. He had no funding, no support, absolutely no help whatsoever, but single-handedly changed the future of this species. And I saw that same story happen again and again and again. It often comes down to one person that stubbornly refuses to let an animal or plant fall off the cliff of extinction. So with that in mind, what we wanted to do was take this beautiful historic ship. It's 118 years old. It's called Oosterschelde. It's a Dutch ship. We wanted to take it around the world, following the journey of Darwin on HMS Beagle. The truth is, our journey isn't exactly the same as the voyage of the Beagle. The voyage of the Beagle took 5 years. Ours took 2. The main reason for that is, like I mentioned at the start, the voyage of the Beagle was a survey voyage. It went multiple times up the coast of South America. So our voyage isn't exactly the same, but we go to every major port that the Beagle went to, and we follow Darwin's journey as closely as we possibly can. We've got 3 awesome project patrons. So Dr. Jane Goodall from Bournemouth, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who you may know, she's arguably the most famous marine biologist alive. She's extremely well known in the US. She's an amazing marine biologist. And Sarah Darwin, one of Charles Darwin's great-great-granddaughters, who's also a very accomplished naturalist and researcher in her own right. So what are we doing? We've got 3 main project objectives. The first and most important element of all this is that we're training an entire new generation of amazing young conservationists. These are called Darwin leaders. They're 18 to 25, but the upper limit is deliberately flexible. We bring them to the ports that we visit. So to be clear, they don't sail on the ship. We fly them to the land, the ports that we visit. We partner them with incredible conservation groups and give them basically an amazing opportunity to hone their skills, like a work experience. We select them on one criterion alone. It's not about their academic qualifications. It's not about what university they've been to. It's not about that at all. It's about the burning passion inside of them to change the world of tomorrow. I'll give you a super quick example. We've had 60 countries of them represented so far. We've had about 120 of them in total. One of them, for example, was from Papua New Guinea that can't even read or write, but planted about 20 to 30,000 trees just with a bag of seeds and a stick, just literally reforesting. So that's the quality we're looking for. It's a different characteristic from academia. It's the best way to kind of crystallize it is just getting your boots on and getting out there and making a difference. Whether it's replanting trees or whether it's saving cheetahs and building a rehabilitation program, it's just getting out there and making things happen. Whether you're meant to or allowed to or can fund it or not, you just find a way and get it done. Those are the Darwin leaders. They're incredible people to change the world of tomorrow. So we select them on the basis of this shining quality inside of them, this incandescence within them, about changing the world of tomorrow. And it's something you can't teach. It's something you can't instill in someone. They're just born with it or not. So we're trying to get as many countries from the world represented as we can. It's something like the Olympics of conservation. And we bring them in groups of up to about 10 to the ports, the land that we visit. They don't sail on the ship. They come to the ports. And what they do is they select an animal or plant project, and then we embed them in the team of conservationists. We pay the team in the country to embed them in and basically bring them into their projects. And then they have about 10 days to study and do a project on that subject. And we give them a professional cameraman or camerawoman to film their projects. They do 3 things. They first look at what's happened. Why is there a problem? What's gone wrong? What are the threats? And what are the reasons? And why? They have to do a film and a report on that subject. Next, they have to look at what currently is being done, and is it working? Is it enough? And again, a film and a report on that subject. Then most importantly of all, they have to really think about the future and what more could be done, how they could change the future of that animal plant, what new strategies and what new solutions, what new ways they could solve to make a better future for the animal plant in question. As mentioned, all of them have a professional cameraman or camerawoman to work with. So to give you a super quick example, this young man was called Joseph from India, and he spent his entire life working to protect primates, to protect monkeys in India. So we selected him from India, brought him to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, and he worked with an amazing team reintroducing brown howler monkeys in Brazil, in the Tijuca rainforest. So he actually went to Brazil, worked with the team, saw the reintroduction of these howler monkeys, worked through the process of what they do, their techniques, their strategies, the work that they do in Brazil, and hopefully will then take that knowledge back to India to use for the next 50 years or more of his life. So the idea is it's not just about training each Darwin leader for this year. They'll be active, they're in their 20s, they'll be active for 50 years or more. So we're trying to train 200 of them by the end of the voyage to make 200 times 50 years of conservation work. So 10,000 years of conservation work. That's what we're trying to do. We've had 60 countries represented so far, covering a rainbow of projects from endemic beetles in the Galapagos to unique plants, to rainforest conservation, to trying to manage sustainable fisheries with unique octopus projects. They're all on our website if you want to see them. This is actually a little bit out of date. We've had more than this now. This is just a few of them. We've got way more than this. I think we're about 120, 130 now. But yeah, well over 60 countries. They use our ship as a floating laboratory / media platform. This was a really hard thing to execute. We had to raise about £4 million to undertake this project. And my biggest fear is that they would come and regard this as a holiday. And I can honestly say that has not happened once. I give them all a talk at the start of their placements and say, look, this is your opportunity. It's yours to use or yours to waste. There's the bar over there on the ship. If you're here, just mess around. Don't waste our time. Just go over there and do what you want. But if you want to excel and do something incredibly special, because you will never have this opportunity again, this is it. If you're here to work, we're here to work with you. And every single one of them has been incredible. This photo was actually taken, honest to God, about 3 a.m. in the morning. And I came up just to observe them. And this is them working with their camera teams. We've had some incredible ones. One of them rediscovered this lost species of gecko on Cape Verde. It was thought to be extinct. Others discovered brand new behavior of an octopus in Fernando de Noronha. We've had some incredible projects. In each port, we do a mixture of mammals, birds, reptiles, invertebrates, amphibians, plants, and marine life. So this is training these amazing young people. And we've built now this family, this network of these amazing young conservationists that hopefully will continue their work for 50 years or more. And again, hopefully in a small way, change the world of tomorrow. So those are the Darwin leaders. That's the primary objective of Darwin 200. The second element is that every single week we beam out the world's most exciting classroom to children around the world. Every single week we have new experiments, natural history curiosity of the week, a live uplink to the ship. We have quizzes. We have about £200 in prizes that we give away every week. And we beam live to different conservationists in different countries so that kids around the world, totally and utterly for free, can take part in this and learn about conservation and science and natural history and replicating these experiments. I'm from Poole, down the coast, not too far from here, and I have a warehouse. And in that warehouse, we built a studio that's kind of like a Darwin laboratory. So we pre-record these little experiments, and every week we have a new one, and then the week after the results, the answer to the questions. And the kids in the schools have to recreate these experiments at school. Each class can win prizes. So everything from bioluminescence and why creatures glow in the deep sea, to how to make pH indicator solution from a red cabbage, to volcanoes, to growing crystals, you name it. And we also have a curiosity of the week, a natural history curiosity. For example, why fluorite, a mineral, glows, why it fluoresces. Its name, fluorite, fluoresces. How and why, what's the process behind that? And as mentioned, every single week we beam live to amazing places. So in real time with Starlink, so this is Starlink here at the back, we beam live to kids all across the globe, from Madagascar to Australia to China to Canada to UK. They can ask questions. So, what does a giant tortoise eat? Then in real time with a camera, we can literally show it eating grass, for example, or whatever. Or our wonderful partners in some of the aquariums and their projects that they're doing there. And then, of course, we beam live to the ship as well and see what the ship is actually doing and where it is and what the adventures that it's undertaking. Where possible, we literally follow the journey of the Beagle and what Darwin did and saw. About a year ago, we were in Galapagos, and we brought our ship over here, Oosterschelde, through this strait here between Bartolome Island and Santiago at the back, because we wanted to retrace where the Beagle went. The Beagle did the very first soundings through this channel and literally created the maps. And no one had, as far as I'm aware, there's no maps since that. It's pretty amazing. So we retraced the journey of the Beagle there and literally went exactly where the Beagle went and so forth. Then last, as the ship goes around the world, we've been doing a worldwide survey of birds. We've had 600 species now recorded. Every single day of the journey, there's a bird survey happening, as well as, to a lesser extent, cetaceans, so whales and dolphins, and pinnipeds, seals and sea lions and their relatives. Then we do lots of special projects, like planting trees in many of the ports, and we've done surveys for seamounts and getting some of the very first images on seamounts. And in the ports that we visit, we try and give as many opportunities as we can to local kids to get involved and sail on it for day sails and so forth. Or these guys, these were 7 youngsters from the favelas, the shanties of Brazil. They came on board and we gave them totally free. They sailed from Rio all the way down to Uruguay, to Punta del Este. Then we flew them back from Uruguay. So we try and engage as much as we can with the communities and really get the kids in the ports that we go to excited as well. We go to schools and get them on the ship. We do tour visits. I run a separate project creating resource boxes for schools. I've written about 50 books for kids, and we sent about 600 tons of resources to schools in the UK, Australia, America, and in South Africa. So we bring lots of these different books and iPads to the schools that we visit as well. So that's really an overview of the project. And the last section of my talk tonight is just to show what we've actually done and some of the adventure of the journey. So we set out nearly 2 years ago from Plymouth, where the Beagle departed from, in August 2023. We had absolutely amazing weather, went all across the Atlantic. This is really abridging it and skipping quite a few locations because we just don't have time to do all of them. But we went to Tenerife, then Cape Verde, then Fernando de Noronha, and ended up in Brazil and sailed into the beautiful natural harbour of Brazil. We were incredibly fortunate to be allowed to dock alongside this amazing museum, the Museum of Tomorrow. So in every port we run this Darwin Leader program, training amazing conservationists. But here in Brazil, we did a big Kickstarter campaign online, and we raised, I think, about $10,000 in the end to replant trees, to rebuild the Atlantic rainforest. As you may be aware, the Atlantic rainforest is completely separate from the Amazon rainforest, but the Atlantic rainforest has been mostly destroyed. 80 to 90% has already been wiped out because it's in Brazil's prime agricultural belt. So we did a project to raise money to rebuild the forests of the Atlantic rainforest, which are very important for lots of primates, including these little guys, the golden line tamarins. So with an amazing local partner called the Association of the Golden Line Tamarind, we planted a corridor to connect 2 reserves and rebuild those 2 reserves. Over a week, we had hundreds of local kids involved as well as our team and our crew planting trees. We planted thousands of them, and eventually completed this corridor and rebuilt this. We then sailed further down the coast of South America, and we brought on some marine biologists to do an amazing project. We've got an ROV submersible, so like a drone underwater, and we dropped it on a seamount, so a mountain underwater, which had never been surveyed. No one knew what was on there. And amazingly, the stars aligned. It was incredibly unlikely that it was going to work, but it did. You have to have exactly the right conditions, the right current, and luckily everything was perfect, and we could drop this ROV down, and we got the very first images of the soft coral and the fishes on the seamount. And I'm not saying it's because of us, but it definitely helped a bit. Those marine biologists have now got it conserved as a protected monument, as a nature reserve off the coast of Uruguay. Again, I'm not saying it's because of us, but it definitely helped a little bit in that process, which is really cool. We then got down to the Falkland Islands, which if you have never been, this is one of the most incredible places in the world. I've been going there for 20 years. It's an awesome, awesome place. You can see 5 species of penguins, elephant seals, fur seals, sea lions, albatrosses, literally right there. You have to island hop around the archipelago. It's amazing. Anyway, we brought 8 paratroopers and some Falkland War veterans to the Falklands, and we gave them the ship so they could honour their regiment and sail around the islands to go to the key sites of the battles to honour the parachute regiment, 2 para and 3 para. And we explored the islands. Then as we went through the Chilean fjords from Punta Arenas, through the Chilean fjords and up the west coast of South America, we went through the fjords. I was actually on this leg, which is pretty cool. With my little son, I brought my 12-year-old son on as well and had an amazing time. We went all through the fjords, past the glaciers, up through these fjords. As part of our wildlife survey, within the fjords itself, we came across really big whale populations with humpbacks and even the blue whale, the biggest animal that's ever existed, bigger than all the dinosaurs. So it was pretty amazing seeing this incredible animal out there in the wild. Then as we sailed north along the west coast of South America, getting back in towards the tropics along the coast of western South America, we had Darwin leader projects all the way along in Valparaiso, in Concepcion, Valparaiso, Callao, Puerto Lucia, all the way up the coast of South America. Then finally to get to arguably the climax of the voyage, Galapagos, obviously where Darwin made some very important observations. We had a bumper load of amazing Darwin leader projects there, which were really successful, and as I mentioned earlier, retraced the journey of the Beagle around much of the Galapagos, including this important survey they did between these islands. This is Bartolome and Santiago at the back, and this is practically unchanged. This is pretty much exactly as it would have looked when the Beagle went through here nearly 2 centuries ago. We've done loads of really cool little competitions, one of which we did a doodle competition all across the world. Kids drew in doodles. We had thousands of them come in. We picked a winner, this little young man called Sol. We flew him and his mum and his dad to Galapagos, and he was with Sarah Darwin, Charles Darwin's great-great-granddaughter, and they had a week exploring the Galapagos and going all the way around the archipelago. Then he recreated his winning doodle, so the entry that he'd drawn, he redrew it on the side of a school with lots of local kids. And so that was the drawing over there, which is really cool. Then in the evenings, we got lots of local kids on board the ship and gave presentations about our project and got them really excited and went to lots of schools and got them involved. The ship then sailed all the way across the Pacific. We went to a few places that Darwin didn't go to, like Rapa Nui or Easter Island. And these are the famous moai, these incredible stone statues, as I'm sure you've seen. Beagle did not go there, but we just couldn't miss it. It was so cool. And sailed across the Pacific. As I'm sure you all appreciate, the Pacific is enormous. It's bigger than all the other oceans and seas of the world put together, and there's room left over. It's roughly 1/3 of the world. It's enormous. We often don't appreciate that because on our projections of the world on standard maps, it's each side. But if you actually look on a globe, it's almost 1/3 of the world. It's enormous. So we island hopped all across the Pacific, from Rapa Nui to Pitcairn to Marquesas Islands in French Polynesia, to Tahiti, to Rarotonga and Tonga, and the Cook Islands, across to New Zealand, then across to Sydney. We were very lucky we managed to get to Pitcairn, which, as you may know, is one of the world's most remote inhabited islands in the world. It's another UK overseas territory. I'd been there previously. It's an amazing place. When I went 10 years ago, it had 47 people there. Today, I believe it's in the low 30s. We undertook an amazing project looking for new species of invertebrates, of bugs. And I think it was 8 new species, which are being named at the moment. And the Explorers Club, the Explorers Club in New York gave us this 100-year-old flag that we've been flying in each of the places that we go to. So the ship then continued its journey across. I have to admit, my job isn't to be on the ship. I run the project and raise the money to execute the project. So I have to be honest, I was pretty jealous seeing all the content coming off from the camera team on. But the ship finally got across to New Zealand, where it had to have an annual inspection, and it came out of the water and the hull was inspected and cleaned. Then it went back in the water to sail across to Sydney in November. And we had a really special, and I think Diana is here today, that was actually here. Oh, you're on that leg? That's from New Zealand to Sydney?
No, from Sydney to Hobart.
Sydney to Hobart, oh cool. I'm very jealous. And yeah, we had an amazing time in Sydney. We did loads of special activities there. We had a great range of Darwin leaders, I think 12 projects if I remember correctly, but also Chris Darwin, one of Charles Darwin's other descendants. We recreated a walk into the Blue Mountains that Charles Darwin did. We brought on loads of local school kids on the ship and dropped the ROV around Sydney Harbour to look at the marine life. Then I guess the climax of the time in Sydney, we went to Sydney Opera House and they allowed us to bring the ship literally right alongside it. And our team of Darwin leaders and camera operators then presented their projects inside the opera. You were there? Oh, amazing. And we had the ship literally right outside from the Opera House, so the Darwin leaders could present their projects and their films and so forth. Then simultaneously to all this, we also raised, I think, about 10,000 Aussie dollars and planted thousands of trees over the course of the week and helped rebuild some of the forests that were once there. We then left Australia and then the ship has done 2 immense voyage legs. The first one, it went back to New Zealand, to Christchurch, and then went all the way under the Pacific, the Southern Ocean, all the way down through the roaring 40s, the furious 50s, and the screaming 60s, all the way through the Drake Passage to the Falkland Islands again. I was there a few weeks ago with it in February. Then it did the most recent leg from Falklands to South Georgia, then to Cape Town, and it arrived in Cape Town literally just yesterday. So they had an amazing time seeing all the beautiful wildlife of South Georgia and this amazing island in the subantarctic. So my final slide is that what's to come. So the ship is in Cape Town now. It's about to go to St. Helena, then Ascension, then the Azores, then it will land in Falmouth. So if any of you guys would like to come and be part of our final event in Falmouth, it's on July the 18th. I'll send the invite over to Philip and he can circulate it. The ship is then going to do a final leg, the Victory Lap, along the south coast into London. So it will actually sail right past Bridport. It will be right out here. I think you're going to be on it. Yeah, okay. Then it'll come into London about, it'll sail something around the 20th. It'll come in front of Bridport and then get into London something like the 24th, 25th, something like that. And so if you'd like to come either to Falmouth or to London, we've got events in both of them. And yeah, you'd be very, very welcome. So that was my little overview of Darwin, the Darwin 200 project, and what we've been up to. And again, if you'd like a talk focused specifically on Darwin's adventures and what he saw during his voyage, I'd always love to come back and do so. So thank you so much for listening. And if I can answer any questions, I'd love to do so. So thank you. Oh.